Hey all, it's Myra Dill from EFit Nutrition, and I'm excited to be part of the Chiropractors Back on Track Challenge. So today we're actually going to be talking about start your engine. So I'm looking at food for fuel and food for pleasure. So we're going to talk about some of the basic sources of fuel and why pleasure is important when it comes to mapping out your food. So I love food, that's my disclaimer. I also love to cook. So I take a lot of pleasure in food, both from the smell, the taste, the aromas, the preparation, everything about it. So I'm not going to make you a nutritionist, but I am going to talk to you about some top tips today, and we're looking at balance. So first thing I want to talk about is water. So why is water part of nutrition? Because 70% of your body is made up of water. And from a nutritional point of view, it's pretty important if you want to stay on track for balance to make sure you have enough water in, because water also helps your body be in tune with its hunger signals. So you can imagine if you're dehydrated and thirsty, but you can't figure out that cue, sometimes we'll be reaching for something that is unhealthy, that we actually don't need the caloric value in, when we really just need water. So how much water do we need? I like to use just a very basic average when I'm starting off with clients, taking their body weight in pounds and basically saying that half that body weight is what you should be getting in ounces a day. So if you weigh 160 pounds, that means that you should be getting in around 80 ounces of water in a day. So let's check the box for water, and then let's look at our sources of fuel. So what do we use fuel for? We use fuel to move, we use it to sleep, we use fuel for a whole bunch of restorative parts of your body during sleep. So fuel is important. So sometimes when people come to see me and they're trying to lose weight, ironically, they are not eating enough. They don't have enough of the proper fuel in their body to actually let their body work the way that it's supposed to. So what are our sources of fuel? The number one source of fuel that your body likes to use is actually carbohydrates. So what is a carbohydrate? Carbohydrates come in a bunch of different sources. So your breads, your pastas, your vegetables, your fruits, nuts have carbohydrates in them as well as other aspects of fuel, but carbohydrates is a really big area of fuel choices. So what do we look at in our carbohydrates? We're looking, if we're trying to be healthier, in a sustained release of fuel. So those would be what we call our more complex carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrate is really just a fancy word for sugar. So what is a complex carbohydrate? If I bind more sugar molecules together, it's more complex. So that's a complex carbohydrate. So let's look at another source of fuel, which is protein. So you hear a lot about protein, a lot of different diets in terms of high protein, low protein. Protein is really a building block that your body needs that's made up of what we call amino acids. But forget the sciencey side of it. What's the important part of proteins? Your body does require proteins to actually help build or retain muscle. And muscle helps your body burn more energy. So it's very useful to have a higher muscle value, which we get in by having enough protein in there, to actually burn more fuel just as we're sitting around. So I'm a big fan of protein as long as it's a lean protein. So what does a protein look like? Most of us think of proteins in terms of things that swim, things that fly, and things that walk. Those are your animal proteins. But protein also comes from plant sources. One of my favorite sources of protein is black beans, which I can throw into a lot of dishes very easily. I can make burgers out of them, I can throw them into salads, I can heat them into chilies. So we look at beans and legumes as some plant sources and also some of our vegetables. But by and large, if you're not a plant-based eater for protein, anything that swims, anything that flies, or anything that walks is likely a source of protein. So we've got our carbohydrates, we've got our proteins, and then you've got your fats. So I know a lot of the times when we talk about fats, people get a little bit nervous because all they think about is bad fats. But your body needs fats. So what do we use fats for? Fats help thermoregulate our body, fancy word for temperature control for our body. and it also is an insulating protective layer, and it helps with regulation of hormones. So fats are really important. It's the type of fat that we're using that's going to be really important for us. So when we look at different concepts, we're looking at protein, carbohydrates, and we're looking at fats. The brain's preferred source of fuel is actually carbohydrates. So sometimes if you're feeling sluggish, you wonder why the first thing that you reach for is something sugary. It's because your brain knows that that's the simplest form of energy that it can get. So why is it so important to eat for fuel? Because we want to give our body enough energy that we, number one, enjoy our food, but secondly, that we're not asking the body all the time to be racing for energy, and then we never get to our actual pleasure stage. So how do we get fuel versus pleasure? I like to think of it very simply like clothing. So every day you wear clothes that are comfortable, or your work clothes, or your weekend clothes. You don't wear a black tie outfit or a gala outfit or something super fancy, those high-heeled shoes, women, every day, all day long. I like to think about fuel for food the same way. 90% of the time, I'm wearing my comfortable clothes or my work clothes. 10% of the time, I'm wearing those more extravagant pleasure clothes. So think about having your eating patterns in somewhat the same way. 90% of the time, I'm just trying to fuel my body. I can fuel my body in a pleasurable way using spices, herbs, any kind of seasonings, or the way that I prepare my food. But when it comes to pleasure, the things that are less calorically valued for us, so let's say maybe desserts, chips, chocolates, ice cream, those pleasure things, those should be a very small part of your eating patterns if you're trying to be your best you, which is essentially for the next 20 days what we're trying to do. I'm not telling you can't have pleasure. I'm just going to ask, think about as your homework during the challenge or as part of your challenge this week, how much of the time are you actually eating for fuel versus how much of the time you're eating for pleasure?